Coming up on Why Should I Trust You? Tim Ryan, a Rust Belt moderate Democrat and former congressman from Ohio. A guy who talks about steel mills and union halls and the Cleveland Browns. A guy who ran for president just 6 years ago. But these days, you listen to him talk, and he just might be one of the most MAHA Democrats we've ever met, saying it's time for Democrats to fully embrace a new, modern health platform that meets Americans where they are today. Ryan is also calling out Republican officials who are all too happy to take MAHA votes while, he says, giving lip service to their health concerns while boosting big agribusinesses and the ultra-processed food makers at every turn. He writes, if Republicans truly want to claim the mantle of MAHA, this is the moment to prove it. But he's also calling out his own party, the Democrats, who he says have been way too timid in talking directly to supporters of the MAHA movement, too dismissive of MAHA wins, just because they're coming from the Trump administration, or because of where some in the movement stand on vaccines. So what does Ryan think his party should be doing to harness the power of MAHA? Why does it matter? And what's at stake with the midterms fast approaching if they don't? Let's get started. Hey, everyone. It is so good to be back. We are psyched about this conversation. So, Tom, I know you have met Congressman Tim Ryan, the former congressman from Ohio. You met him a while back while working on The Circus on Showtime. Yeah. I recently met him at this conference in Ohio. He is a fascinating person. And immediately when the conference wrapped, I was like, we got to get this guy on the show. It's going to be a good one. But first, who are we? I'm Brenda Adhikari.
I'm Tom Johnson.
I'm Maggie Bartlett.
And I'm Dr. Mark Abdumalik.
Yeah, and you're listening to Why Should I Trust You, where we dig into the breakdown in trust and health and medicine and science, and we try to move this conversation toward collaboration that it might actually help rebuild it. And remember, you can always reach out to us at questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. We read them all.
Yeah, so today, as we said, we're going to be talking with former Representative Tim Ryan. He is going to be joining us in a few minutes. We know you're going to find him fascinating. But first, Tom, bring us up to speed on what we need to know about him.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to play a game.
I love games.
Yeah, we're gonna play a game. Do you have pen and paper?
Oh shit! Stand by.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, grab your pen, grab your paper. Brenda's actually gone to get the paper.
I mean, Tom, you told me to go get pen and paper.
You're right. You're doing all right.
I'm a rule follower. You know me.
Okay, we're ready? Okay, so the game's called Who Said It? I'm gonna read you a quote, and I want you to write down whether you think it was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or former Congressman Tim Ryan. And obviously everyone's familiar with Kennedy. If you're not so familiar with Ryan, as we mentioned at the top, he represented a district in Ohio for 10 terms from 2003 to 2023. It's really a slice of America's Rust Belt where he was. And, we're talking auto industry, other manufacturing, and thanks in part to Ryan, it's a region that's really experiencing a bit of an economic renaissance. That's who he is. Cleveland Browns fan, we'll get into all that. But who said it? Okay, quote number one. We talk a lot about healthcare, which is really disease care, which is really sick care. We wait until people get sick, and then we spend a lot of money trying to get them healthy. Okay, so just jot down your pad. Was that Kennedy or Tim Ryan? All right, quote two.
Brenda, can you move over so I can see what you wrote down?
No cheating,
no cheating,
Mark.
Okay.
Look at these high levels of obesity. Look at these high levels of diabetes. These are national security issues. So RFK Jr.
You're already blowing my mind because I'm like,
well,
I see where you're going with this, Tom.
Yeah, but it might not be.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to.
And finally,
go with my gut.
Who wrote a book that they titled The Real Food Revolution?
Shut the front door.
The Real Food Revolution. And I'll give you a hint. It had a preface written by Dr. Mark Hyman, who you might know as an influential MAHA thought leader doctor.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We got an answer key here. I
got 100.
All right. Quote number one. Who said it? And this was we talk a lot about healthcare, which is essentially disease care, which is really sick care. All right. Mark, who said it?
Ryan.
Wow. Maggie, who said it?
I said Kennedy, but I feel like I'm wrong based on how confident Mark was.
Brenda, who said it?
I said Kennedy. It's like textbook Kennedy.
Got it. All right. We'll get answers in a second. Quote number two. Who said, look at these high levels of obesity. Look at these high levels of diabetes. These are national security issues. Who said it? Mark.
I put Kennedy.
Okay. Maggie.
I said Ryan.
Okay. Brenda.
I said Kennedy.
Okay. Finally, who wrote the book, The Real Food Revolution, with the preface written by Dr. Mark Hyman? Dr. Mark.
Ryan.
Maggie.
Kennedy?
Brenda.
I put Ryan, but I think it's Kennedy.
Okay, answer time. All of these quotes are Tim Ryan.
Just
I
wow.
hate this, Tom.
Oh, Tom, you tricked us.
You
Now, not
set
only
us up.
that,
You
quote
set
number
us up.
one, we talk a lot about healthcare, which is really disease care, which is really sick care. That was Ryan 4 years ago. Quote number two, look at the high levels of obesity, look at these high levels of diabetes. These are national security issues. That was Tim Ryan back in 2015.
That wasn't Hegseth?
Finally,
2015?
2015. Who wrote the book Real Food Revolution with Dr. Mark Hyman as writing the preface? That was Tim Ryan's book back in 2014. That's 12 years ago.
Wow.
So Tim Ryan was very MAHA-ish, a decade before MAHA was MAHA. I love this quote from the New York Times Magazine. They wrote about him back in the day. They said, think Deepak Chopra meets Michael Pollan in the body of a former high school football player turned Democratic congressman from the Rust Belt.
That is good.
We
That's
have to
good,
read
right?
that quote for Tim Ryan when he
We
comes
will.
on.
All right. He's born, raised in Niles, Ohio. At 29 years old, he was first elected to Congress as a Democrat. He represented Ohio's Steel Valley. This is like Youngstown, parts of Akron. It's manufacturing, it's auto, it's blue collar. And he was reelected and served 10 terms. In Congress, he was highly critical of free trade and the effects on jobs and the industry in his region. He focused a lot on economic revitalization of the Rust Belt. He focused on labor rights. And throughout his time in Congress, he argued Democrats need to strengthen their ties to blue-collar voters in the Midwest. He also co-sponsored the Medicare for All Act, while still supporting people's ability to keep their private health insurance. So you can start to see this kind of healthcare theme move into his wheelhouse. He served on committees and, he worked a lot to improve the healthcare of veterans, which again is another topic we're talking about a lot today.
I mean, we're talking about healthcare reform there, and a lot of that is, if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. But what makes him really interesting to us at this moment in the healthcare conversation is that he was talking about many of today's Make America Healthy Again themes long before they had a name like that. So back in 2012, he wrote a book on mindfulness and meditation called A Mindful Nation. It helped, put mindfulness on like the policy political map. It legitimized these conversations. And now, mind you, Congress has always had a quiet prayer room tucked off the House floor since the 1950s, but Tim Ryan did something different. He was among the first lawmakers to introduce secular, modern mindfulness and meditation into these halls of power. Again, he helped legitimize these conversations within policy circles. So that was 2012. 2 years later, now we're 2014. We're still, again, way before all this MAHA stuff. He turned to the food system and he wrote this book, like Tom mentioned. So I did kind of know that answer. The Real Food Revolution, Healthy Eating, Green Groceries, and the Return of the American Family Farm. He argues that federal policy and industrial agriculture were contributing to rising rates of chronic illness. Stuff we hear all the time now, but again, back then it wasn't talked about in that way. But Ryan's advocacy is actually deeply personal. So in that book, he writes about his wife who suffered a debilitating health issue. She had weight loss, fatigue, pain, all these non-specific symptoms. And then, the downstream effects of that, physical effects, mental health effects, they really struggled to find out what was happening. And eventually he connected with Dr. Mark Hyman, like Tom mentioned, who's well known today in the MAHA movement. Some critics argue that some of Dr. Hyman's claims and recommendations go beyond the strongest available evidence, and that he can sometimes oversimplify complex medical conditions. Now, Dr. Hyman, he went digging and looked into his wife's history and concluded that a lifetime of eating processed foods and antibiotic use, especially during childhood, had, quote, undermined her gut health, making her hypersensitive to gluten and many other substances. He describes his wife as having, quote, an overgrowth of bad bacteria and yeast that were causing inflammation. So now Tim says his wife improved after a program that was set up, and we're talking about supplements, medications, and foods that, quote, rebalanced her system and rebuilt her gut, which in plain language means off gluten, off dairy, off sugar. Not so easy. So, of course, today, Secretary Kennedy has made Eat Real Food a slogan, but Ryan was laying all of this intellectual groundwork a decade ago. In the book, Ryan analyzes what he saw as America's broken food system in which taxpayer dollars support a food industry that is making us sicker and sicker. It's point of discussion that we've heard a lot, but he also offers ideas for how Americans can demand change in this space. He makes a bold prediction. And remember, this is back in 2014. He writes, quote, "A new and vibrant vision of food in America has been developing for decades, and it's reaching a tipping point. I believe once a new vision is presented more widely, people will gravitate toward it, and they will support it with their advocacy and their votes, both in the marketplace and, get ready for it, at the ballot box." So that sounds a whole lot like the Make America Healthy Again movement a decade later, but from a Democrat.
Yeah, and just a little bit more about Tim Ryan, the politician, before we bring him in here. In 2016, he tried to unseat Nancy Pelosi as the leader of the House Democrats. He made some headway, got some votes, but fell well short, of course. We know the history. He joined the 2020 presidential race and competed in the Democratic primary. And he cited the closing of a GM plant in Lordstown as his catalyst to do that. In 2021, he ran to represent Ohio in the Senate and lost in that midterm in 2022 against J.D. Vance. And in 2025, he considered but chose not to run for the governor of Ohio. So just to wrap it up, over the years, from his time in Congress all the way up till now, he has argued for changes that go far beyond sort of the traditional economic issues that would be bread and butter for a blue-collar Ohio district. He's been an advocate for reforming our food system and farm system, as Mark said, and reforming what our taxpayer funding supports when it comes to food, tackling the crippling costs of chronic health, because he sat on that Ways and Means Committee in Congress and saw firsthand the costs of a sickening America. He's fought for getting vegetables in school lunches, teaching kids mindfulness and emotional learning at school, getting more nutrition education into medical schools. He's advocated for using psychedelics to help heal veterans struggling with PTSD. He's a guy who's represented industrial Ohio, who cites the agrarian founding father Thomas Jefferson as his hero. He hunts and does hot yoga. And just about the only thing that I guess you would believe if I told you is that he loves the Cleveland Browns. Everything else is, if you not exactly what you would think when you met him.
I am so excited to talk with him. So coming up next, we're going to be speaking with former Congressman Tim Ryan. Okay, and a big "Why Should I Trust You?" welcome to former Congressman Tim Ryan.
Hello, how are you?
We are so good. So I met you at a conference really recently. I wasn't aware of your backstory. I got to tell you, we were just right before you came on talking about the different ways in which, your journey and the things you've been talking about for years have sort of mirrored some of the things that are being said in the MAHA movement. I got to ask you, Congressman, do you look at this moment right now and do you go, yes, this is what I've wanted all along? Or do you go, are you fucking kidding me? These are Republicans saying this? What's going through your mind?
No, a little bit. I'm glad. I was a little bit ahead of the curve, I think, on some of this stuff, honestly. But it's such an important issue. I think it's a foundational issue, like with a lot of the MAHA food and health and regenerative ag. It's so foundational to the country. It's foundational to our health, to our economy, and all that stuff. So I'm just excited, like at the rally at the Supreme Court the other day, to see such a diverse group of people, total MAGA folks were there, and you had Friends of the Earth, in the Environmental Working Group and those kind of groups. So to see it come together in like a new coalition, I've been waiting for this new coalition to kind of assemble. So it's fun to be a part of.
So when you saw that Kennedy, I have to ask you, is that a picture of Robert F. Kennedy Sr. behind you?
Yeah. And that's been in my office for years. So, this is not a play for this podcast. I've been a Kennedy fan I went to John F. Kennedy High School and grew up, Catholic. And so the Kennedys were very, I think, helped form my worldview. President Kennedy, I pour through his speeches and Robbie Kennedy's speeches, and I have my entire life. So this is this really weird moment.
It's so weird.
This whole thing is so weird.
Well, let me ask you about that. So it's 2024. You see Kennedy's running. He was first running as a Democrat. He switches to an independent. And then in August, he does this thing where he aligns with President Trump. And now it's the Make America Healthy Again movement. What went through your mind? It's a bit of a version of the question I just asked you, but even more specifically, what went through your mind when you saw that?
There were a lot of different thoughts and emotions, honestly, through that, because I was really pissed at the Democrats. I was like, how the fuck does Bobby Kennedy's son not get in a debate in the Democratic primary? How has our party gotten so off track that we're not even willing in a person who I remember seeing him at the 2008 convention, at Red Rocks. He was giving a speech at one of the events around the convention, and came up and was talking about the environment and this. I'm like, I like this guy. I didn't know much about him before that, but I'm like, I knew who he was, obviously, but because I'm a Democrat, but I've been very critical of the Democratic Party for some things, and that shutting down the debates, not letting him have an opportunity because I liked what he was saying on a lot of things. And I knew there was a vax thing was hanging out there, but there was so many other things that he was talking about that resonated with somebody like me that I thought, let's hear what he has to say. And so I was really pissed that he didn't get a chance to be a Democrat, and we drove him basically into the arms of Trump. So I was, kind of upset about that. And then politically, I knew that I liked what he was saying. And I remember, some of my nephews were like, I'm a Kennedy guy. I'm an independent. I'm this and I'm that. And I'm like, oh, shit, here we go. Now he's going to bring this group of activists and some young people to Trump. And I live in Ohio. So I'm like, these Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, you start doing North Carolina, you start doing the math on someone who was polling at some points 15% as an independent, bringing those voters to Trump, even if half stay home and half go to Trump in those swing states. That's bad for Democrats. So it was like an emotional thing, and I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I was mad at the Democrats for closing down debates and not having a real discussion within the party. I was mad at Biden for running because he said he wasn't going to run, and I was very public and vocal about that and got the scars to prove it. But when he moved over there, I was like, I don't know, this is going to be really hard for Democrats to win this. So him going in with Trump was really frustrating.
Were you pissed that the Kamala people did not talk to him or entertain the idea of him being a running mate?
Yeah.
Getting that endorsement? Like,
it seemed like, yeah, I was. And it seemed like it was a fait accompli at that point. It was over because, you locked him out of the party. And even if you have questions about the vaccination piece, let him get up on stage and talk about what he's thinking, right? Just at a high level, it's like, okay, does Big Pharma control the FDA? Probably. Does Big Pharma throw a lot of money around to the Congress? Yeah. Should we give a kid like 13 shots at one time, for their immunizations? Probably a bad idea. So can we have a conversation about that? Like, I don't know where I'd fall because I still don't know I don't know his whole positions on it, but the level of corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and in the FDA and all of that stuff, worthy conversation to have. Not sure I'll fall on your side of, what you're saying, but we should definitely have that conversation. And so I think by the time Kamala got in, it was over at that point. I think the Biden folks shut everybody else out. And it is what it is. They were controlling the party.
You mentioned vaccines a couple times here. Is there a responsibility to draw a line when a candidate is so controversial about something like vaccines? Because you couldn't separate that from him, really.
I think you give him a chance. No, I think you got to have the conversation. We're talking, and here's the thing. Like, I'm not a huge Trump supporter. So let's just get that out there. I agree with some of the stuff he's doing, for sure. But to not have a conversation, and we were trying to say, Democrats were saying, this is about democracy. He's a fascist. He's going to shut the government down. He's going to take over with the military and all of that stuff. And at the same time, we were shutting down our primary. We were boxing out anybody who wanted to run for president against Biden. So we were being very anti-democratic within the Democratic Party. And so I just think it's a bad look. I don't feel like it's the democratic values that we have. If he got up on stage and if there was a series of debates like they had in 20, and he got up there and he was talking craziness about vaccinations, his polling would collapse and he'd be out of the race. And then the field would form from there. So let that process take place. And then those Kennedy voters aren't going to be like, I hate Democrats. They wouldn't even let him debate. They would have said, well, I heard what he had to say and he went a little too far for me. Let me hear what these other Democrats have to say. And at least you're able to then not piss voters off to say you don't even want to hear what he has to say when no foreign wars, regenerative ag, all of these other things, those were primary Democratic voters 10 years ago.
So you think it's even worth it to have the conversation, even though some of what he has said, could have had real world consequences and are having real world consequences. We're coming out of the pandemic, the vaccines, saved so many lives. And now we have this guy coming in, many have called him, staunch anti-vaxxer, but you still think that he should have had his moment in the Democratic Party.
100%. 100%. Well, the whole country was founded on the ability to get up and speak your piece, even if you sound crazy. I mean, do we not hear craziness every single day from highly, sought after elected officials say crazy stuff all the time? I just feel like we're becoming, I don't want to say intolerant, because you're allowed to have your views and you're allowed to disagree and you're allowed to say, no, I don't want that guy. But we can't get to the point, especially when we're in a time of, this is not the word I want to use, but we're regenerating our democracy right now. I feel like underneath all the toxic political conversations, there's a new America kind of being born. And when you guys, AI, regenerative ag, the way we teach kids, the what we know about the brain today, that we know more about the brain in the last 20 or 30 years than we have in the previous 250 years. Like, we're learning so much, the human genome, all of these things around our health and wellness and how we just live in the world today. If you're entering a period of kind of a little bit chaotic, you want to make sure you're hearing things, you're getting information out that could be, and maybe it's not Bobby Kennedy's position on vaccinations, but maybe it's like the final position ends up, we should really look at who's getting appointed to the FDA and what their backgrounds are and who are they really there for. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's a legitimate conversation, foundational to the country. And as we start, having leaders of a certain political party, and this is happening in both parties now, boxing people out of the conversation. I mean, if you don't agree with Trump, you're out of the conversation, period, end of story. And if you didn't agree with Biden, you're out of the conversation, end of story. That is no way to regenerate the country.
Mm-hmm. But the Democrats were more rigid. And you're a Democrat that's run in Trump country and found ways to speak to people that are disillusioned with the party and still vote for you. I think you won 10 times, but did you see at that moment that the Democratic Party was just being too top down, too rigid, too close-minded? You're saying something that's against our orthodoxy, therefore you're out. Whereas the Republican Party said, we need to win an election. Yeah, okay, so we're the party of anti-regulation, but you as a reformer candidate, we have a place for you here. They were just more opportunistic. Tell us what happened here.
Again, Trump, lots of disagreements from a personal level and a political level, but he is the best politician in the country. There's no question. There's no line he won't cross. I don't think he considers the implications, moral, ethical implications of his actions. There's a lot of grift. There's a lot going on there, and I don't want to spend too much time because I don't like to really talk about it. But from a political standpoint, him bringing Kennedy over was a genius political move. Like politics is about addition, not subtraction. And I think some sense we forgot that. Now he's gone too far, and I think there's going to be a backlash to some of his behavior and his actions. But that particular move was a really good move, and letting Rubio back in the camp, letting Cruz kind of back in the camp. He knew he needed to assemble the coalition needed to win, and Kennedy was the big chip on the board that would swing the election, and he was able to bring him over.
All right, so now you got MAHA inside MAGA. All right, now the inauguration has happened. A year or so has passed by. Let's talk about how MAHA is doing inside the Trump administration. Talk to us. Tell us what your assessment has been of this alliance so far.
I think it's been pretty successful under the, food piece. The red dye number 5 and all of this stuff, and the flipping of the food pyramid. The peptide thing I just saw the other day. Like, I think there's a new set of eyes on a lot of the way things have been going. And I think, Bobby has tried to do some of those things that needed to be done. They're all first steps, but I think that wouldn't have happened without the MAHA movement pushing the Trump administration on the environmental side, on the EPA side, on the environmental toxin side, on the agriculture side. Can't say that at all. Just with what's going on with glyphosate, the Camba, all of these things that we know are causing cancer, and to ignore those. So you got red dye number 5 out of your kids' Fruit Loops, and you're getting poisoned with glyphosate. I mean, so that piece, which is a really significant piece, we've not had any success on that.
And Congressman, do you think the way the parties are right now, the way that they're set up right now, and the platforms that they're pushing right now, do you honestly think that the Democratic Party could be the right party, is the right party for these issues in this movement? Or, and let's just be real honest here, is the Republican Party still better set up for the sort of anti-status quo currency that really runs through the MAHA movement?
It's going to be interesting. I think they're losing that. I think MAGA's losing that. I think, given everything that Trump is doing with the war, now gas prices, I just went to fill up $5 in Ohio, for just unleaded. So I think a lot of this, the trade stuff, the tariffs on, tariffs off, really destabilizing the economics of people's pocketbooks, making it worse, not better. And when you lose that, I think a lot of the draining of the swamp, while, there's a lot of people with the last name Trump making a lot of money right now, and there seems to be a lot of insider dealing happening within the administration. I think they're starting to lose folks. I think the war for a lot of people was the last straw. And so I think they're losing that current. Do they still probably have it a little bit more than the Democrats do? Yes, because they are perceived as being anti-establishment. I think you've got Trump has a lot of bad ideas right now, the war, the tariffs, so on and so forth. I don't feel like the Democrats have a lot of ideas. That's why it was great to see Cory Booker show up at the rally, Shelley Pingree. We have a few leaders in the party who are really saying, no, these are important issues.
I'll just confirm for you, Dr. Ryan. I'll just confirm for you, Congressman. We've talked to so many doctors.
That is much more popular than Congressman Ryan. I will tell you, polls way better.
All right. Well, listen, Congressman Ryan, I'll say this, which is just in conversations I've had with MAHA supporters, our show has had with them. There is definitely frustration with Donald Trump and the Republican Party. But the one thing I'm not hearing is and therefore I'm going to vote for a Democrat. That's the one thing that, like, the assumption is, therefore, there's going to be the swing. But there are people I'm hearing who are like, I may stay home. But to vote for a Democrat is the bridge that they haven't crossed yet. And maybe some have, but that's been my kind of anecdotal experience.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that may be true. We did do some polling with some of the groups I work with that had 57% of Republicans said they would vote for a person of the opposite party if they were talking about these issues around food and health and kind of the MAHA issues.
Okay.
If Democrats talked about that in a really, I hate the word authentic, but in a real way, it's just whatever. But if they talked about it in a real way, and I think a guy like Cory Booker has a legislative record of like really pushing these issues. Shelley Pingree's an organic farmer up in Maine. So I think these kind of leaders, Jimmy McGovern in the House, Democrat from Massachusetts, like these leaders can speak in a very authentic way about it. And I think if you do that, you can start pulling people over. At the end of the day, people want to vote for people who are going to make their life better. And they will look past the party if you don't sound like a traditional Democrat. That's why it's like, for me, I want the Democrats to embrace, like in the book, The Real Food Revolution. I mean, embrace regenerative agriculture, connect for people the ag subsidies to our healthcare costs, to our national deficits and debt. Connect those together. Kids not being able to learn in school because of their diet, and the diabetes epidemic and the obesity. Talk about those things, because then you sound like you really care about them. Hopefully you do really care about them. And I think those voters will say, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that come out of a Democrat's mouth, when Democrats have been talking about some of this stuff. But, it's just like SNAP. It's like Republicans want to cut SNAP. Democrats say, no, you can't cut that. It's like, where's the reform position? Where's the reform position around we got to get good, healthy food to our kids, and we got to cut out the fraud that's in these systems, of course. But how do we get good food to our kids? So it's not black or white. It's anybody who's lived long enough knows that these issues are complicated. Life is complicated. I want the Democrats to come in and pitch the reform position. Reform on education, reform on healthcare, reform on agriculture. I mean, think about somebody. Now you got me a little bit fired up, and my coffee's kicking in.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Think about this. You're just an average voter sitting out there. You pay a lot in taxes. You're getting squeezed left and right. Whether you're rich or poor, middle class, you're really getting squeezed. The rich are paying a lot of money in taxes, and they're not seeing a lot happening. So they get frustrated. They're like, I don't mind paying my taxes, but what's happening? So look at a system where we subsidize industrial agriculture. So, and we all know that, the suicide rate with farmers and the squeeze for farmers and family farms and all of that. We're subsidizing industrial agriculture so we can produce basically fake food that can get converted into oils, soy oil, corn oil, high fructose corn, all of that. We subsidize that so the farmers will grow it. That leads into an industrial food system that has us all getting sick: diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, inflammation in our bodies, all of these things. And then we subsidize the healthcare through Medicaid and Medicare to take care of the people that are sick because we made the food that's bad for them really, really cheap. And you're sitting there as a taxpayer going, wait a minute, I subsidize this that leads to high costs in this, and then I subsidize the high costs in the healthcare system. You want to shoot yourself. You're like, what are they doing there? So I want, as a lifelong Bobby Kennedy, Jack Kennedy Democrat, I want the Democrats to step into that area and say, this is the reform we need. Pay farmers to grow healthy, fresh food. Pay them a premium. You're going to save so much on the back end, it's not even funny. Like, think about this as a business would think about it. And then you're going to make people healthier, more productive. Students are going to have more focus, more concentration. They're going to be healthier. And then you're going to bring down your Medicaid costs. You're going to bring down your Medicare costs. And with that money, you could, the debt is outrageous at this point. So you can start paying down the debt, but then reinvest that money into the systems that are actually working. And that
But
to
just to,
me is like the
yeah,
huge opportunity for some political party to step
that's the
into.
whole system. Like
Yeah.
you have a prescription. I see that. But just to get Democrats in the conversation, you wrote in Stat recently, you were talking about, this EPA move regarding microplastics in drinking water. And you said this may be like the biggest MAHA win of them all so far. But it is limited. The EPA is dedicated now to like investing in researching this, documenting the problem, figuring out what needs to be done. But at least the conversation started. But you said that you said Democrats shouldn't dismiss this just because it came from the Trump administration, but they should challenge Republicans to actually follow through. So like it seems like a first step that you're saying to your party is like call out the Republicans who are taking the MAHA votes, but aren't actually doing the things that MAHA wants them to do. Is that a first step? Is that the way to look at this?
And that's a big step, I think, for political folks today, given how tribal things are, to say, I agree with, Trump on X, Y, or Z. I come from, an old industrial area in Ohio between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Like we saw what trade did, so him being kind of anti-trade, so to speak, that's making it very elementary, but anti-trade, or he wants to put tariffs on, that resonated with a lot of people. But it was more of an acknowledgement of what happened to those older industrial areas down the Ohio River, textiles on the, in the mid-Atlantic and up in New England and all of that. When he said that, it was an indicator to them that he actually understood what they were going through because they have been decimated in the last 30 or 40 years. So to disagree with him on that, you're communicating to those voters that you don't understand what they're going through or what they've been going through for generations now. Same with the wall. The wall wasn't about the wall. The wall was about, I'm putting immigration front and center. And so you had everyone talking about the wall, which means Trump was going to be good on immigration. Now, who doesn't think we should, just let people walk into our country without knowing who they are? It's idiocy. You have to know who's coming into your country. So he was able to position himself. So to say you agree with him on something because of the polarization, you feel like you're betraying the tribe. And my point is, one, these are issues that are important to people, voters. So forget Trump. What's important to the voters that you're trying to win over, and what's important for our economy and our healthcare system and all of that. So agree with them on that. And then now you're in the argument. You're like, I agree with this too. Now let's figure out, now the fight is about how we get there, which used to be politics. Like, yeah, we agree on communism's bad. Well, what's your approach? What's my approach? Or healthcare. Yep. Healthcare, too much money. How do we fix it? This is your side. Republicans say cut it. Democrats say don't cut it. And then this debate got so stupid that's either cut or don't cut. And it's not that easy. So agree with them. And then when those of us in this business, some of us like read a lot of books on marketing and persuasion and how people think. And one of the easiest ways to persuade someone to your side is to agree with them on something, right? So now you're not the hostile enemy. You actually are kind of becoming in tune with what they're expressing. And so it becomes, you become aligned a little bit on the problem, and then you can work it back from there. The other thing that's important in our politics today to prove to independent voters or people you're trying to persuade is that you have the guts to actually disagree with your own party on something. It's like you can't just say, oh, I want to be bipartisan. I want to be bipartisan. Well, what are you going to disagree with in your party that is wrong and, wrong-headed, that you will have the guts? And I think it's a gut check issue for voters. You will have the guts to take them on. So yes, agree with them on the merits of their argument, their goal, and then let's figure it out. So don't say you're MAHA and then you got the entire Environmental Protection Agency. And you put use the Defense Production Act to increase production of glyphosate. Like, okay, now if I get some credibility with somebody that I'm talking to, and I say, yeah, we got to get rid of this glyphosate. This is, we got to get these chemicals out of our food system. Be like, okay, how are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to try to wean the country off of glyphosate, and the Trump administration just increased production of glyphosate. So now where are you at? Now that person has to make a decision. So having those a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more nuanced conversations, I think would serve the country very well.
We are big fans of nuanced conversations. Let me just name something here that to me strikes me as being kind of fundamental to why some of this feels really difficult. And I'm curious, Congressman, what you think about this, which is that it really seems as though when you have parties and groups who don't agree on a shared set of facts, it's very difficult to move forward on that solution. And here's what I mean when I say that. What I often find happening, and it's bonkers to me that this is like the Republican Party that is originating the problem, which is saying like there's a or not even the Republican Party, I'll say the MAHA movement, right, is saying there's this problem with poison in our agriculture and that there is, these dangerous pesticides are harming our health. And the response often from the Democrats is, well, the dose makes the poison, and we really have to look at the science. And the truth is, if you have it in much smaller doses, it's not that dangerous. And they may be right on that. And then, of course, you've got farmers who are like, wait, you're just going to pull the rug out from under us? Like, that's going to tank us, right? And so if we can't all agree that glyphosate is harmful, then it suddenly becomes, how do we move forward? And my question to you is, I'm just using glyphosate as an example here, but like, do you see the same thing happening, which is like the Democrats have become the party of like, well, the facts aren't exactly that. And the Republicans are the ones screaming from the rooftops that there's a problem. Like, is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, I think the wall was another good example of that. That putting up the wall was, there's a problem with immigration. Well, we were watching videos of people just walk into the country, and the Democrats are saying, well, we can't build a wall, and a wall is clearly not the solution to it. I mean, El Chapo digs under the wall. It's like they're going to figure out a way around it. But it was a visual and an indicator that it was a problem. And then the Democrats were basically on the side of it's not a problem, which is why Kamala lost and why Biden was tanking, because we were watching it on TV and they were basically like, a wall's not the answer. This, that. Well, what's your answer? So, yeah, I think Democrats too often, instead of just saying, yeah, that's a problem, let's talk about it. Now, again, Trump completely flipped on it. But I think what we need right now is like a leader who would say, we elevate it to a national conversation, like the ag, the food, the this, the that. Like, we're all worried about our kids. We all get all this information on our social media feeds about our kids, the technology, screen time, all of this stuff. It's great that we're learning about this. The president should elevate and have like real conversations and bring in farmers, bring in, MAHA, bring in Dr. Hyman and the doctors and those folks, and create a real national discussion. Put it on TV, put it on C-SPAN, put it on YouTube. Bring in a few of the key podcasters. So you're bringing in.
We did that in Ohio with you, Congressman.
Yeah. So take what we did there with the States Forum in Ohio, which was a great conversation, and elevate that to a national discussion. I remember when Bill Clinton first got in, he did this big round table about the economy. And him and Al Gore, were sitting there through the whole thing. And they had economists, and they had this and that. And they were just having a national. I was like, man, that's pretty cool. Let's figure it out. We got really smart people, really smart farmers, really experienced people in all these different fields. Let's sit down and have an honest dialogue, an honest conversation about how we fix it. I think that would be so refreshing. And, you'd get, well, let's start a commission. Well, Have the president head up the commission. Have the president actually be a part of those conversations. What could be more important in his
We'll
time?
host it. We'll host it on Why Should I Trust You, Congressman Ryan.
It's just there's no nuance now, and there's no conversation now. I live in a Republican area, and I've got more Republican friends down here. So we moved about 3 years ago, and I love them. They're great, and we have phenomenal conversations. They just want to talk, and once you talk to them, they're like, "All right, that makes sense. That makes sense."
Yeah,
and you can move the conversation forward.
I imagine half of our listeners right now, though, could be starting to mutter to their dogs as they listen to this, as they all walk their dogs, saying like, Tim Ryan's a politician. He's not a scientist. And, the science, this could be their perspective. The science is not there to say that glyphosate as it is being used is dangerous to humans. And there's no sort of mushing around that. There's no sort of compromising around the facts, like the scientific conclusions. Like, what do you say to them? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that clear what I'm trying to say? Like they I think want this to be grounded in facts and truths, not in, hey, this is a way to kind of compromise and reach out, because science doesn't compromise. It provides answers and, insights, and we have to act on the best that we can do with what we have in front of us. What would you say to that?
Well, I would just say you look at the cancer rates in Iowa, for example, or in, the western part of Ohio, and some of these really big agricultural areas. So what is going on there? And, what is happening? And, there's a lot of accounts that say that glyphosate is a big part of that. And where is the science coming from? Who's paying for the research? That I've been around long enough to know that, throwing a bunch of money to an Department of Agriculture at a big university in a ag state can get you some answers that you want, And I would just say, come on, let's have the conversation. And look, if glyphosate isn't poisoning anybody, then fine. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm not like tunnel vision on it. Like, if it comes to find out that this isn't doing anything, fine. But there's ample evidence now that this clearly is something. There's something going on here, and maybe it's how it's being applied. And let's dig into those numbers. And again, if you're having a conversation, bring in the scientists, bring in the pro-glyphosate people, bring in the anti-glyphosate people, bring your data. Let's have a conversation. Like, I think politicians shouldn't dive into the weeds on that stuff. They should be there to make sure we're getting the right information, the honest information, so that we can have an established set of facts. And science today says one thing, and it could say something else in 5 years too, that we don't, that is different. It could be 180 degrees different, So we've got to. But my thing is, have everybody in on the conversation.
And don't gut federal research into any of this.
Well, that'd be a decent start.
Congressman, you talked a couple of things about. You said gas prices. You said what's important to voters. You said, what do the people want? And if we're talking about this group that's MAHA aligned voter bloc, and you ask them, what is the issue? It's not glyphosate. It's not food dyes. It's costs. And it's something that you know about because you were a member of Congress during the time when healthcare reform was a huge talking point. And there's a new survey out. It says that it's the dominant issue. It's about half say it will have a major impact on their vote, and 42% name lowering costs as the top priority. Again, more than food additives, vaccines, pesticides, all of it. It's basically like, can you live your life as an American? How are you putting, gas in the car?
That's a KFF survey that just came out.
The survey that just came out. So do you think this movement is misreading its own voters? Like, this MAHA movement, this coalition isn't even talking about what they care about, which is healthcare costs, which is, it's the economy.
Well, I think it's nuanced and it's a couple levels down. So if you get off of an industrial ag system and you're not spending hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars to grow food that makes us sick and yada yada yada, if you're moving to a regenerative agriculture system and you're helping farmers transition through that and maybe transition off of glyphosate, you are significantly reducing the inputs that farmers need under the current system. And so you're going to, I think, put more money back into rural areas. You sell organics and these other things, you get a premium for them. Things like growing hemp for production.
Right.
There's a lot of other opportunities. So my point is that you can start to lower the food costs over time. I don't think that comes out much in the arguments, but that to me is one of the big reasons you need to do all this.
Well, I'm not even talking about food costs. I'm talking about healthcare costs. I'm talking when you go to the doctor and it's a $300 copay, or your deductible is $5,000, or you can't get, so many medications covered because our leaders are focusing on things that don't address the actual fundamental cost issue.
Well, I think there are other things you could do. I mean, you can, and I've been out now 3 years plus, so I don't know all the legislation that's out there, but negotiating down drug prices, moving towards a system. I mean, there's no magic wand today.
Mm-hmm.
The pharmacy benefit folks, like taking them on, and they're driving up the costs of prescription drugs like crazy. So actually taking them on would be a huge reform that is needed. But the big structural thing that's needed in healthcare to me is like, we need to, again, we talked earlier about this, we have a disease management system. We don't have a healthcare system. And we're learning more and more about how to stay healthy. And I mean, you see Gary Brecka, you see Andrew Huberman, you see Rhonda
Joe
Patrick,
Rogan.
you see Joe Rogan. I mean, these are real people who have real solutions, and you have this knowledge that isn't penetrating the healthcare system in a significant way. It's not penetrating our education system. Like, you look at this shit that like Huberman talks about, and Rhonda Patrick and Hyman, that should be taught in the schools.
Well, Tim Ryan, I want to ask you about that, because what you're getting at is a really interesting point. Poll after poll has shown that people trust Democrats on healthcare more than they trust Republicans, which is really interesting because you've got this MAHA movement that's aligned with the Republican Party. But it sounds to me like what you're saying, and I actually believe this very strongly, that culturally, Democrats don't actually own the message when it comes to health. That when you talk about things like podcasts and, the national conversation around, people feeling increasingly, it's what we talk about the show a lot, whether it's through cost or access or just not trusting expertise, that they're increasingly going to alternative sources of information, right? And I guess my question to you is, how do you square that people can still trust the Democrats politically on something, but message-wise, they're actually not where the culture is? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think they trust Democrats on healthcare because they know Democrats won't cut healthcare. There's a pretty, it's black and white today. Republicans will cut it. I mean, how many times Paul Ryan going off the cliff, wheeling the grandmother off the cliff in the wheelchair. There's, I think, in the culture still, Democrats are seen as we won't cut that. We're for that. We're for Medicare. We're for Medicaid. Obamacare expanded Medicaid. So they're part of the Democratic brand that is kind of still solid, is around the healthcare piece. But again, and this is all kind of entangled in the Bobby Kennedy, MAHA kind of thing, and then repelling from that movement because it was Bobby Kennedy. I think on those innovations that are happening, it's not innovations, it's just knowledge. We're understanding more. I mean, you listen to a Huberman podcast, you better, buckle your chin strap, because you're in for 3 hours of like really digging deep into a topic. And so that stuff, like, if Democrats could grab that, and again, I'm talking politically here, but if they could grab that and authentically, again, this is why I think Cory Booker's a really interesting person today, because he's into all that stuff. If you could grab that and say, these are the innovations that we now understand that we didn't understand even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, in some instances. How do we get this? How do we reform our schools so that this stuff is being taught in our schools? How do we reform this so our medical, I mean, they still don't teach nutrition education in our medical schools.
Right.
They're not meeting the national standard for that
Well,
piece
Kennedy
of
is
a
now
medical.
I think he's pushing for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's crazy. I think I wrote about it in my book.
You
I
did.
think the issue is though that if you're going to put something in like a medical school curriculum and start teaching the doctors that this is what you need to be doing, it needs to be evidence based. It needs to be beyond let's just, this podcast did a 3-hour episode and this is so intriguing and let's talk about peptides and let's talk about these supplements and let's eliminate this from our diet. Like there are many, many, many steps which require government funding and science and rigorous replication before we can start inserting these things in the curriculum. I mean, I think there are many steps before that.
Well, we've been talking about it a long time and no one's done it. So sure, fine, let's do it. But the idea of eating whole foods is healthier than eating highly processed food. The evidence around a high fructose corn syrup and spikes in blood sugar can be directly connected to diabetes and the obesity epidemic. And
Sure.
It's no different than the tobacco companies, spiking tobacco with nicotine. They're spiking foods to get us to feel good about it, and then they subsidize it, and so we all know that's common sense, and there's a lot of evidence behind it. I'm not saying, look, doctors have a really important role in our culture. They're trusted. And so for them to not even, you could still go to a lot of doctors today, and you could be overweight, you're maybe your vitals are okay, but like they're not telling you like you got to lose 50 pounds. Or you got to, well, tell me what you're eating. I remember my wife went to Dr. Hyman. That's why I love this functional medicine. When she went to Dr. Hyman, this is 12 years ago, the first question he asked her was, were you born vaginally or by C-section?
Yeah.
I was like,
Okay.
holy shit. Like,
You're going
we're
way back.
I was worried he was going to ask us about how much wine we had at dinner last night. Like he was going back to that. And like, what was her mom's stress level during her pregnancy? And like, just taking a step back and getting the big picture it's just common sense, but it's such an important part of it. So yeah, I mean, of course you want whatever they're teaching, but we've got plenty. They're not even teaching anything now. And then we're walking over the cliff.
Here's my.
I mean, around the food stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but just oversimplifying here. I think we've established that Democrats really dug in on Obamacare, and for years were the defenders of like the healthcare system. We need Obamacare. We need to provide this to millions of people, expand it, and then MAHA and working with the Republican Party sort of came in and said bodily health, individualized health, take care of yourself. The systems are failing you. Tear down the systems, tear down the institutions. Let's focus on kind of our bodily health. It sounds like you're saying the Democrats need to talk less about systems, more about bodily health, but the real way to make us healthier is through improving our systems. You're talking about educating doctors. You're talking about where our taxpayer dollars go into this food system. You're talking about big sweeping, how our schools treat mental health and meditation. Is that a fair sort of description of how you see the solution?
Yes, I think that's very, very insightful. The institutions need to reinforce your individual ability to be healthy. They shouldn't cut against it. And around reimbursements and food being expensive and all of that stuff, like the institutions, the systems should reinforce innovation, and I think that's really why we're stuck right now. even in the Department of Defense, which is the huge bureaucracy, to be a new innovative technology, you can't break through because you're not a big prime contractor, right? And it's probably the same in healthcare. Like, you need systems that cultivate, especially in a republic like ours, you need a system that is constantly innovating. And I think what we're seeing now is our institutions have broken down. They've become corrupted. And I used to give speeches about this, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, about like the systems are all broken. The immigration system's broken, the healthcare system's broken, the education system's broken, the agriculture system's broken, because we've not had a reform minded in this party. Trump had a real opportunity to do some of that stuff, but then he loses track of it. But the reform mindedness has got to come back into the culture. We're not going to be able to do it. And you see the institutions too. I mean, with the corruption in the Boy Scouts and in our civic institutions too, and obviously government, Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, some of the big famous pastors who got caught in scandals. And, but what you're seeing now, which I love talking about, is people coming back to the Catholic Church in large numbers. I think speaks to the spiritual crisis we're having in the country. But you have reform coming from Pope Francis to Pope Leo, going back to Pope Francis saying, "Who am I to judge?" That he was laying the groundwork for reforming the church to move away from the dogma, abortion, all this stuff, just taking hardline positions, saying, "Who am I to judge?" That was an inflection point. And then that he carried that on, and then Pope Leo, now with the war and all that has happened in the past few weeks with him. So people are coming back to the church because the church, in essence, has reformed itself, is reforming itself. And people want to be a part of that, and they want more community and all of that. So that's a really good example of, it's not healthcare systems or the government, but it's a good example of how a leader can start laying groundwork and get the train on another track, and it can actually work. But it takes moral leadership and it takes courage. Again, taking on your own party. So Pope Francis was probably taking on a lot of cardinals when he said, "Who am I to judge?" There were a lot of conservative bishops that were really, really upset that he said that. And so again, that's why really strong leaders now are going to be so important.
And this lays the groundwork, which it sounds like you're sort of envisioning like a MAHA 2.0, which is take this energy, take this disruption, but start to reform institutions. Don't tear them down. Don't go around them. These are the ways we could actually make large scale change for all Americans, even the ones that can't afford, Whole Foods, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they're starting to see it. I think a lot of the activists within MAHA are starting to see the opportunity. There's no better energy in the country right now politically than the MAHA movement. It's the tip of the spear of reform happening in the country. And a lot of people in that movement are learning about politics. They're still fairly new, but they've got the juice, they got the energy and the intelligence and the passion to really make some changes. And again, going back to John Kennedy, like the call to the Peace Corps and Vista, and the military, you are a part of rebuilding this. Ask not. And so it was taking the energy from World War II, all the resiliency, all the talent, and then also the space race was really about kind of galvanizing science and technology in the United States. Yes, for space, but it spins off into the private sector and then all these other things. So why Kennedy was a great spiritual leader as much as a political leader is he was emotionally connected to the people and he asked them to then participate. So MAHA
Are you
people,
talking about Jack Kennedy right now or Bobby Kennedy?
Jack Kennedy.
Okay.
Well, both.
Yeah,
Both.
yeah.
I mean, the brothers.
Oh, okay.
But the call to the Peace Corps, was like, you have to do. I can't. I'm president, but we all have to do this.
Congressman Ryan, have you shared these views about MAHA in this moment and how you think MAHA is arguably the most successful movement right now with Secretary Kennedy? Have you spoken with him?
No, I've not spoken to him. I texted with him, months and months ago a little bit, but no, I haven't.
So you're looking backwards, but we're in a midterm year here. Let's look forwards for a second and get your perspective kind of as an insider. Like right now, voters are pulled in all these different directions. We have war, we have gas prices, we have healthcare, we have MAHA, we have culture, we have transgender, we have so much conflicting information. Okay.
Yeah.
You were there. What advice do you have for Americans as they approach the midterms? How do they decide who they should trust when they pull that lever?
I think the big question is going to be, do you want to check on Donald Trump? The wars, the chaos, the tariffs are on, tariffs are off, the costs that you promised. I think the big question is going to be, do I agree with the Democrats on everything? No. Do I even like the Democrats necessarily? Maybe not. But I think we need an absolute check in the Congress. And I think a lot of people are going to vote for Democrats for that reason. Now, as a Democrat, I will say, you can't you can't think that means they like you, because Trump won't run again and it'll be a different Republican, and the party can shift again and have another face and another vision maybe. And so Democrats have to get themselves in a position where people are aligning with them on the issues that are important. And they have to see them as aligning with them on the issues that are important, because they're going to look at the Democrats and say, well, Biden's caused this inflation, Trump's made it worse. I'm going to go back to them, but I don't want to be in a war right now. Why do we start a war in the middle of the energy producing countries? That probably wasn't a great idea. Why is there so much chaos in the global economic system right now? So I think they're gonna look at that issue really. And even if they don't super love the Democrats, I think the Democrats are going to have a good year.
Congressman Ryan, final question. To me, it strikes me that there's a new politics emerging. And maybe it's because people are sort of imagining a post-Trump era. But I'm seeing people like, whether it's Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, James Tallarico, there's people out there that seem to be speaking in ways that are identifying like a third kind of way of concern. And if it's not just concern, but like a third way of viewing this country and all its warts and all, Are you seeing that? And is that an opportunity? And I guess, we only have two parties really in this country. Make a case for why the two-party system can still work for us, and it can still house maybe these new types of forces that are taking place in this country that in some ways the MAHA movement is very illustrative of.
Yeah. To break up the two-party system right now would be really hard, I would think. You need a hostile takeover of at least one of the parties. You need a hostile takeover, kind of reminiscent of what Bill Clinton did in '92. Obviously, it's much, much different now, but he was the reformer. He was the moderate, so to speak, progressive on a lot of things, but he was the guy taking on the left, and he just survived. And before you know it, started winning primaries and consolidating, and then it became the third way. It became, I do a lot of work with the Progressive Policy Institute now, which is like Bill Clinton style Democrat, center left, and he was able to then govern from the center left. But it was a big fight within the party, and I think that's what both parties are going to need now, really. And it's hard to do when the leader of the party, usually as a president like Biden did, restricted any of that reform that would have percolated up naturally if he would have stepped aside and not run. It would have been a huge primary, would have been a big conversation about where the Democratic Party goes. So you need a hostile takeover, and it's not pretty. because, and I was guilty of this too a lot of times, but like, it's really hard to take on your family. I mean, if anyone's ever tried to marry somebody who their parents didn't like that is a brutal fight, and if you stick to your guns, it works out, and everyone comes around, but you got to hold the line. And so the leaders we need today have to have like intestinal fortitude to take on the things you would disagree with on Trump and have a real argument with Trump voters on why they should move to you. And then you got to have a real argument in the family, which are brutal, to get them to say, like, this is where the country needs to go. These really are our values. If we're going to be the party of health, we've got to be the party of agriculture reform. We got to be the party of healthcare reform. We've got to be the party of education reform. So we teach kids how to be healthy, all of that. You got to take on established interests within your own party who have been personal friends of yours. Like, I was in Congress 20 years. A lot of folks are my friends. Like, I disagreed with Biden on some stuff when I was running for Senate. I was like, look, I don't agree with you on this, and I'm certainly not going to take one for the team in the Senate race. And I was getting calls from the White House, saying, hey, hey, you mind like backing up on this or that, You got to be able to have those tough conversations. And leaders today, too many political leaders today, just kind of acquiesce. Just in a note on this, I'm a sports guy. I'm sure that's a shocker to
Cleveland
you,
Browns
but
fan, we said in the intro.
yeah, a lot of post-traumatic stress from being a Browns fan. But I grew up. I went to Catholic school. I had from in Northeast Ohio, like football hotbed, sports hotbed. Had tough coaches. They were tough. Working class Catholic school teachers. Weren't in it for the money. We're in it for the mission. And then I went on and played a little bit in college. And I've always been enamored with how coaches are able to lead and how they build the culture in the locker room. But they have to make a lot of tough decisions. They got to let go of players they love. And they got to say, this is not in the best interest of the team. I know you've been here for X amount of years. I love the shit out of you. But my job is to protect the integrity of the team. And they just have great coaches have that intestinal fortitude. They have tough conversations with players. Like, you're not living up to the blah, 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 whatever. I say all that to try to make the point that in politics, we need more leaders who are willing to say no to some interests that don't serve the party or the country. And one of the things Trump is able to do is to draw a line and say no. Now, he says that on things I don't agree with him, but I think people see that as being a strong leader. And so the low information voter sees that he's being strong, and they like that. And I don't think we need more Democrats who are like that. We need more Republicans who are like that, who disagree with Trump and are willing to disagree with him and say that publicly and take a stand on it. And it seems like it's only Republicans who are out of office. But to that point, not to go on too long, but to that point, there's a reason why the MAHA movement kind of took off when Democrats had agreed with a lot of this. I feel like you guys remember that book back in the day, the George Lakoff book.
What book?
George Lakoff, Don't Think of an Elephant, was one of many that he wrote. But it was basically about, he was a linguist, and he talked about how the brand of Republicans was a strict father. He broke it down into the family dynamic, strict father, and the Democrats were the nurturing mother of our national family, and that. I think when I think about the MAHA movement evolving, it came from a little more of the strict father stuff. Like this is bullshit. You're poisoning our kids. This is bullshit. I'm not going to let you do this to our kids. It came more from that. I'm like, as opposed to, oh, you're poisoning our kids and this is not good. You know what I'm saying? There's just a little energetic.
Which is also funny because it's like these MAHA moms that are saying it that way. I mean, I agree with you that there is a visceral connection that they've been able to make with these issues in the country. Like, you go to any MAHA conference, it's not like just like scientists and people like that. It's just parents of kids who are sick.
But you're saying like this is why Michelle Obama's efforts at,
let's move
lunch reform didn't perhaps click. But yet MAHA, when MAHA says, well, fuck this, why are we feeding our kids this crap food? That clicks, right?
Well, who you going to follow? The guy says, fuck them. Or the ones that, well, we should, let's try to, I don't know, maybe figure this out, and that was a moment too, where the Obama administration could have took on those interests and made a fight out of it, no.
But Tim Ryan, to be fair, the Republican Party at the time was they were just hook, line, and sinker against everything that had the name Obama written. And the irony now, Tim Ryan, is that a lot of people who supported Barack Obama back then are now, voting for Donald Trump in this election because of Bobby Kennedy. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. There's just there's an energetic shift to it, and there's something biological about someone taking a stand and separating a little bit from the group, and then building up some momentum within that, and you will create a new thing. You'll create a new organism, and that's really kind of where we are right now. So
Democrats need to be more Northern Ohio Catholic football high school league. Got it.
Yes,
right. Go Browns.
Probably comes with some baggage, but there's has its
Tim
advantages.
Ryan, former congressman, served 10 terms in the U.S. Congress. Cleveland Browns fan, MAHA before MAHA, hot yoga enthusiast, and we are so pleased that you joined us on Why Should I Trust You?
Thank you. Love being with you guys.
That is our show for today. Please send us questions and comments to questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. Please leave a rate, review. Check us out on Substack. I'm Brenda Adhikari. He is Tom Johnson. He is Dr. Mark. Maggie Bartlett producing for us today, and that was Congressman Tim Ryan. We will see you right back here next week.